kind of guy, kind of a by temperament, trying to integrate every story into a comprehensive whole, something of an architect, uh, if you will, or an INTP if you're familiar with typology, which is most, to cite something and then call it nonsense is feels cheap and cowardly, but uh, maybe whatever typology, whatever. Um, but I want to integrate all stories into a cohesive whole because it seems like the funnest and most comforting thing to do. Now, comforting stories aren't necessarily bad. I do believe we need a degree of comforting stories. Uh, the role of culture used to be sharing something moving, yes, but also aesthetic consistency to create a safe space for people. I mean, people share homogeneity. They don't share diversity. You can share diversity as a value, but most cultures through time have shared what they have in common. You can't really, I mean, you identify with the people that have things in common with you. You don't you might appreciate people who have things separate from you, but I so I'm hoping the code can fill this need for a shared ideal, if not kind of old-fashioned aesthetic homogeneity that is comforting and shared. And just to go back to comfort as a safe space to think has value. Certainly we need to test ourselves and keep our minds open, but in a day you do need to have a place to take a breath and forgive yourself for the mistakes you've made and just to enjoy being comfortable, to really rest before you sleep, perhaps. Maybe the code could fill that niche. I don't know how. So I'm imploring you, the viewer, now to contribute towards the code with fan art and perhaps just simple jokes hidden in texts and um, contribute towards the code if you can find it in yourself to be inspired by it. I think we need to have a unifying story, and I think one of the things that can be helpful to make a unifying story stick as well as just making it helpful is to collaborate on making it become real. And the more abstract an ideal, perhaps the more compelling it can be for the most amount of people to contribute to it. Now, I'm speaking for myself. I think consciousness as an act of hope needs to believe that consciousness is an ethical good and that to contribute to that ethical good is worth suffering. This is very Catholic already. Contribute, but that's a good thing because Catholicism is a good thing. So we need to contribute to a story or a reality, a story that becomes real, let's say, that consciousness is an ethical good and that contributing to expanding consciousness and making as much of the universe conscious to the deepest degree possible, basically increasing the volume of consciousness, uh, um, contributing to that. Or I put it as contributing to a lineage that gets to heaven is the meaning of life. Something like that, but the code, my conception of the code, maybe it will inspire you, is that all matter one day will be conscious and will collaboratively, voluntarily, enthusiastically consenting to being conscious together. Now, that might involve competition at even in the fullness of the code, the fullness of all pieces of matter being integrated as consciousness. I don't know. That's a fun one to think about because I know I only come alive when there's a little bit of competition. There's no feeling like playing pickup basketball and shrugging someone off, pump faking, using your strength and experience to get the ball through the hoop. There's no feeling of being alive like competing. And it's possible that one day, I don't know, is it possible that one day the lion will lie down with the lamb? Which I don't think was said in the Bible, but it's a super cool phrase and it's kind of beautiful? Or is it possible that the lion will hunt as ethically as possible and put the lamb out of its misery quickly after the lamb has reproduced only, kind of thing? Um, so I want everyone to work on the code, and I want it to be the meme of memes, the ideals of ideals that increases the volume of consciousness in the universe as an ethical good. Consenting, voluntary, collaborating consciousness. And at that point, if you have the entire raw material of the universe, maybe it already is, but let's say it's not. I don't think it is. Collaborating on consciousness, you might be able to make more dimensions than that are, certainly perceive than that are. If you imagine a human with instruments that can measure, perceive, and give useful data on dimensions that we can't directly perceive, I think ethics, in a manner of speaking, might be one of these dimensions. I think there is an ethical good, and again, this will annoy some people. Believing that there is such a thing as an ethical good is so valuable to an organism. So even if there is no ethical good, let's try and collaborate on the code to create ethical good, if that's possible. Um, let's defeat the heat death of the universe. Let's create flourishing consciousness that expands infinitely. Perhaps that's what God wants. Perhaps God is real and this is what he wants. Or perhaps God is a useful fiction, more true than untrue, that we might create or become by the expansiveness of this collaborative project that I call the code. This is the story that I work on that inspires me. Perhaps my faction of the code might be defeated by a better vision, and that might be part of the competition that increases fitness, that leads to a more beautiful code and a more true articulation of the aim that we should be aiming towards, the ideal that we should be striving to. What else? I think that's it. I think that's pretty manic. Hopefully, I've been engaging. Maybe you're giggling at me, but I'm adding some stagecraft. I'm really articulating myself. I'm not playing possum. I'm not cuddle fishing. I'm speaking very directly, and hopefully, I've imbued you. Hopefully I've inspired you to think about the code when you're on the bus or when you're dreaming, and maybe begin to plant the seeds of a global articulation, or sorry, collaboration on what the code is. Thank you for listening.